ביאור משנה ה' נאמר בתורה, it says in the Torah, בראשון ב-14 יום לחודש, בערב תאכלו מצות. It says in the first of the 14th of the month, in the evening, which means the 15th, you should eat matzot. Right? מכאן שחייב כל אדם מישראל לאכול מצה בלילה הראשון של פסח. So there's an obligation of every Jew on the first night of Pesach to eat matzah. Throughout Pesach you don't need to eat matzah. The obligation is only in the first night. You're not allowed to eat chametz, but you can eat cucumbers. Yeah, you can eat cucumbers. You don't have to eat matzah. Mishnatenu bא ללמד, our Mishnah comes to teach us. We already know this because we've been Jews for a long time. But over here the Mishnah is going to discuss what is chametz, what is matzah? How do you make matzah? What's the consistency of matzah? באיזו מצה אדם יוצא ידי חובתו בפסח? What kind of matzah? A person does his obligation on Pesach. So he says, אלו דברים שהאדם יוצא בהם ידי חובתו בפסח. These are the products that a person does his obligation of eating matzah in Pesach. בכזית מצה שנאפתה מהם. As long as you eat a kezait, a measurement of a olive, that was baked from them. הוא יוצא ידי חובת אכילת מצה בלילה הראשון. Then he does his obligation of eating matzah on the first night of Pesach. What are they? חיטים שעורים בקוסמים. So it's wheat, ובשיפון ובשיבולת שועל. It's the 5 grains. It's wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, I think. That's what it's called in English. Yeah? Those 5 kinds. אלו הם 5 מיני הדגן. These are the 5 kinds. What's so special about this one? Why not rice? Why not potatoes? What's so special about this one? שעיסתם באה לידי חימוץ. So if you're a bakery, you know that if you leave these guys alone, yeah, it becomes, it starts to rise. Only these things rise. Nothing else rises except these 5 grains. Nothing else. I think it's called, they make gluten. They become stretchy. Yeah? It's a chemical reaction that happens there. But the chemical reaction happens only in these 5 kinds.
If you don't put yeast in there.
I think so, yeah. It just take more time. וכשנזהרים בה שלא תחמיץ, it says, and if you make sure that these kinds don't rise, ואופים אותה מצה, and then you bake it into a cracker, יוצאים בה ידי חובת אכילת מצה. That's you do your obligation of eating matzah. ומבואר הטעם בגמרא שנאמר, and the Gemara explains, it says, לא תאכל עליו חמץ 7 ימים. It says, you should not eat on it חמץ 7 days, תאכל עליו מצות. You should eat on it מצות. ודרשו, what's מצות? דברים הבאים לידי חימוץ. Only thing that rise, that rise. אדם יוצא בהם ידי חובת מצה. A person does the obligation of eating matzah. דברים שאינם באים לידי חימוץ, but things that don't come to the hands of rising. For example, what doesn't rise? Orez, he gives an example, like rice. ודוחן, I think דוחן is millet in English, I'm not sure. וכיוצא בהם, and similar to them, שעיסתם אינה באה לידי חימוץ. If you get rice, you will see it doesn't rise the same thing as though. It becomes spoiled. It becomes rotten. It becomes like bubbles in it. You know, you probably know, you're the baker over here. Yeah, it doesn't become doughy. You know, it doesn't stretch.
Yeah, like corn, if you grind it and you make kemach, probably
yeah.
You can do from.
Yeah. אלא לידי סירחון. The only thing that will, if you mix it with water, what it's going to get to, it's going to get spoiled. But it's not going to become, doughy. אין אדם יוצא בהם ידי חובת מצה. A person does not do his obligation of eating matzah through them. So now, let's go back to our previous Mishnahs that we learned. If you remember, we said, when it comes to the powers of the rabbis, that in the 5th hour, if a person, it says in the 5th hour before, on the 14th of Adar, if a person takes chametz, and he says to a woman, הרי את מקודשת לי, you are betrothed to me, it's not called considered chametz, because the rabbis have such a power to make something which is actually not chametz, it doesn't exist. So now he's going to say, does the rabbis in every situation have such a power? That's what he's going to discuss now. So it says the rabbis came with the power of dmai. You remember we discussed dmai, taking produce. It says you're not allowed to take produce from ama aretz. So it says, what about if you eat matzah from dmai? Did you do your obligation? That's the question. The fact that the rabbi says do not take produce from the Amaretz without tithing it, is that going to make it not eligible to eat matzah on Pesach? That's the next question. Do the rabbis have such power with the dmai or not? So let's see. Veyotzim bedmai, and you do your obligation if you ate matzah from dmai. Yeah. בתבואה שנלקחה מעם הארץ, if it's a produce that was taken from a simple person who doesn't know the rules, החשוד על מעשר, that we don't trust him on tithing, שאף על פי שאסרו חכמים אל האכלה, עד שאסרו מספק, even though the sages says this is forbidden until you tithe it, מכל מקום it says, nevertheless, יוצאים בידי חובת אכילת מצה. You do your obligation. So it says, but it's impossible. We say the rabbis have the power. If the rabbis have the power over here, they should have the power over there.
I think he gets the matzah, the achal matzah, but he's going to get spent on eating it mine. No?
Maybe.
Because the Rabbanan
Maybe, but he shouldn't be able to even...
You can't change the matzah. The matzah is the matzah.
Yeah, but he shouldn't be able to... They changed the matzah on the 5th hour of Pesach, of Yudalet. They say this is not...
Oh, he baked it in the 5th hour?
No. It says they had the power to just make it chametz on the 5th hour. So how do they have the power to... Why, they should have the same power over here?
To make it chametz.
That's right. Not to,
it's not chametz.
Oh, so
the matzah is...
Also over there, the matzah wasn't chametz. It's mutar ba'ana'ah. But they say it's not. So it says, well, how come over here it is? So it says, how come? Ho'il vehi muteret la'ani'im. Because when the sages set up the rule of Dmai, they says we're not going to impose it on the poor people. So now there's some people around the world who can eat this matzah. So you cannot tell me it's forbidden for regular guy. Maybe it's not the best, but it's not forbidden. That's why. כמו ששנינו, like we learned, מאכילים את הנעים דמאי, it says you're allowed to feed the poor person with דמאי, והרי יכול כל אדם להפקיר נכסיו להיות עני, and we said also the rule, so in potential you can say, I give away all my possession, become a poor person. So in potential you belong to it, so therefore you're allowed to eat it. And also it's going to come up, I think we're just going to go quickly through all these cases, ובמעשר ראשון שנטלה תרומתו, it's a first meiser to the Levi that you take the truma out of it. That's obvious. Why do you need even to tell me? שהופרשה ממנו תרומת מעשר, that you take from it the truma of מעשר, אף אם לא הופרשה ממנו תרומה גדולה, even though תרומה גדולה wasn't given to the coin yet. כגון, like we said, we learned it in תרומה, שהקדים הלוי ליטול את מעשרו בשיבולים, the Levi came before the coin. היינו קודם שנתחייבה התבואה בתרומה. But he took it before it was obligated in תרומה. He took it. Before it was time to tithe it. שבכל זה פטור הלוי מלהפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה. He says, in such a case, you don't have to give to the Kohen from that part. Because he took it before it was even, it caught tithing. שנאמר מעשר ראשון, because it says about מעשר ראשון, והרימות ממנו תרומת השם, מעשר מן המעשר. You should give it a tenth of the tenth. מעשר מן המעשר, a tenth from the tenth, but it wasn't tithed yet, so you don't have a problem. ולא תרומה גדולה ולא תרומת מעשר מן המעשר, הילקח יוצאים בה ידי חובת אכילת מצה. Therefore, even though it wasn't done the right way, matzah is fine with it, even though you're going against the rabbis. Okay? ובמעשר שני והקדש שנפדו, what about a second tithe and hekdesh that was redeemed? So we say second tithe goes to Yerushalayim, to be eaten in Yerushalayim. You exchange it for money, You remember, you exchange for money.
Spend the money in Jerusalem.
Yes, the money in Yerushalayim. So it says, what about, he gives the example, רשאי אדם לפדות תבואת מעשר שני שלו, a person is allowed to pay for the wheat of his second tithing, בכסף, ולהעלות את הכסף לירושלים, with money, and to take the money to Jerusalem. והתבואה שנפדתה מותר לו לאכלה בכל מקום. And then he's allowed to eat the wheat in any place. כן, דבר שהוקדש להשם, also anything that was given to God, let's say you say this bread goes to God, whatever, אפילו לפדותו בכסף, even to redeem it with money, והוא יוצא לחולין, it goes out, then it's a sheep, for example, yeah, and then this sheep goes out, you can eat it, but you have to give the money to the coin. וכסף הפדיון נעשה הקדש, and the money becomes holy. ברם, בת, הפודה מעשר שני שלו או הקדשו, it says when you do second when you redeem the money, you have to add again חומש. צריך להוסיף חומש על דמי פדיונו. You need to add like 25%. ובא משנתנו להשמיע שמעשר שני והקדש שנפדו על ידי הבעלים. It comes to teach you that מעשר שני and הקדש, that the owners redeemed it, even though he didn't add the חומש, it's still okay to use for matzah. ויוצאים בהם ידי חלחלת. They transgressed on the rabbis, but since the Keren is there, it's okay. The other one is a penalty, different discussion. לפי שאין החומש מעכב, because the penalty doesn't hold it back from its holiness. והרי הם פדויים, they are considered to be redeemed, and they מותרים באכילה. And the fact that you didn't pay the penalty will get to you later on. והכהנים, what about the כהנים? יוצאים ידי חובת מצה בחלה. The Kohanim can do the obligation of matzah bechala, in the chala, שמפרישים מן העיסה ונותנים לכהנים. In other words, you're on a regular day, your wife makes a chala, so it's not only once a year that you give the wheat offering to the Kohen. Also, every time your wife on Friday or on a Monday bakes chala, she needs to separate a little bit to the Kohen. That's an everyday thing. So it says, those chalas were separated to the Kohen to be eating chametz, right? Yeah. So let's say she didn't give it to him in bread, she gave it to him in wheat, to the Kohen. And he's going to make from that wheat now matzah. Yeah. ונותנים לכהנים שחלה ותרומה אינה מצה הראויה שחלה ותרומה אינו מצה ראויה לכל אדם. This is not befitting for every person to eat. Only Kohen can eat it. שהרי אסורה היא לזרים, because nobody else now is allowed to eat from this wheat. And he's making matzah from it. מכל מקום יוצאים בה הכהנים ידי חובתם פסח. So it's true, you cannot do the obligation, but since he can do the obligation, we allow him. Because we have a rule, we're going to see soon, we're going to have a rule about Pesach, about matzah, that it has to be ראוי לאכילה for everybody. So it tells you for the Kohen, yeah. You're going to see there's cases, yeah, there's going to be cases you're going to see later on. אבל לא בתבל, but of course, you know that if nothing was tithed from it, if the wheat was not tithed, then nobody can use this for matzah, you're not yotze. אין יוצאים ידי חובת מצה בתבל, you don't do the obligation of matzah in tevel, היינו בתבואה שלא הופרשו מן התרומות ומעשרות, with the produce that the person did not tithe it. שהרי איסור גמור הוא, because this is complete prohibition. ובגמרא מבואר אפילו בתבן דרבנן. The Gemara explains, even if it's tevel from the rabbis, כגון הזרוע בעציץ שלא נקוב. For example, it is planted in a pot without a hole inside. It's only tevel from the rabbis, still you're not allowed to. ולא במעשר. So over here we see the power of the rabbis again. The Torah says you're allowed to, but the rabbis come in and says no, because nobody is allowed to eat it. Yeah? ולא במעשר ראשון שלא נתלה תרומתו, and also not in a first tithing that was not giving the truma. What's the case? בגמרא מבואר שאין צריך לומר במעשר ראשון שלא נתלה תרומת מעשר. Of course, if you didn't give tithing to the Kohen, of course you're not allowed to. What's the connection here? שאין יוצאים בו. שהרי תבל גמור הוא, because this is called תבל. אלא כוונת משנתנו היא, what the Mishnah wants to say, even in which case, שלא נתלה ממנו תרומה גדולה. That you didn't give from it the truma gdola. For example, When do we learn such a case? כגון שלאחר מרוח הקרי בגורן. This, you have your wheat field, your wheat salue, and you made it straight, so you know how much you have. לאחר שמחלקי ומיישרים את רימת התבואה בגמר הדישה והזריעה, that you measure your whole produce, היינו כשנתחייבה התבואה בתרומה, at that moment it is obligated to tithe, הקדים הלוי ונטל את מעשרו. The Levi came in and he took his tithing before the Kohen, after the fact, not like before we say it was before the fact. קודם שהפריש, after the מירוח, which means now it is obligated. קודם שהפרישו ממנו תרומה גדולה, before you gave it to the Kohen. ואחרי בחרגון זה חייב הלוי להפריש ממעשרו, לא רק תרומת מעשרה, אלא גם תרומה גדולה. Now the Levi has to give to the Kohen. וכל זמן שלא הפריש ממנו תרומה גדולה, הרי דינו כתבל. And as long as he didn't take from his tithing and he gave it to the Kohen, it's considered to be tevel. ואסור הוא באכילה. And he's forbidden in אכילה. So that's the case we're talking about. ולא במעשר שני והקדש שלא נפדו. And not in second tithing and a hekdesh that you didn't redeem. Yeah, before we redeemed it, we just didn't pay the chumash. Over here, you didn't redeem it all. כלומר, אפילו נפדו, אלא שלא נפדו כהלכתם. It means even if you redeem it, but you didn't redeem it the right way. כגון מעשר שני שפדו באסימון, like we said, but when you didn't redeem it, you need to redeem it not with a stamp. It has to have a real value. Like, yeah, עובר לסוחר, very good. מטבע שאין עליו צורה, it has to be a real value coin. והקדש שחיללו על גבי קרקע, or a sacrifice that you redeemed it on ground, on land, that you're not allowed to. שכגון זה אין פדיונם פדיון, like we discussed before, this is not called the good redeeming. והרי מעשר שני והקדש אלו אסורים באכילה, and then they're prohibited in eating. כל האיסורים הללו אין יוצאים בידי חובת מצה. So these prohibitions of the rabbis, you are not obligated, you cannot do the mitzvah of Pesach with it, of matzah. לפי שמצווה הבאה בעבירה היא, because it's a mitzvah that comes through a sin. ובירושלים אמרו, אלה המצוות, או אלה המצות, these are the commandments, or these are the matzahs, אם עשייתם היא כמצוותם, if you do the matzot the right way, הרי היא מצווה, only then they are commandment, ואם לאו אינה מצווה, and if not, they're not a commandment. What about, oh this is an interesting case, חלות תודה וריקי נזיר. There are some sacrifices in the temple that they are matzah. Very good. So which ones? So most of the halot of Todah, you need to bring 30 halot for a thank you offering for God. 30 of them. Oh, so I don't remember exactly. I think it's 10 and 20, isn't it?
10 and 10, 30 and
30, is like 30 and 10, okay. So 30 is matzah and 10 is chametz. Yeah. So what about if you can you?
How it could be? He can count on the woman in this to bring him matzah to Beit HaMikdash. Maybe it's
He has matzah. They make the matzah on Beit HaMikdash. They make the kohanim get the wheat and they make the matzah.
But now the guy that bring korban toda, I don't know how they do it, but let's say he's going to do 40 matzahs. Then he give it to the kohen and the kohen will eat it.
The kohen makes them. The kohen is making it usually, I think. It's not the guy who's making the chalot. The kohen bakes it the chalot.
He doesn't bring it from there.
He brings the ingredients. I think I think the kohen is the kohen.
He bring it?
I don't think so.
Factory for bread?
Yeah. Just like the sacrifices. It's exactly like a sacrifice. Well, he brings the thing. I think so, but we'll see. Let's see. Yeah. Chalot todah verikikei nazir. This is chalot todah, a thank you offering that you need to be, is brought, some of it is chametz, verikikei nazir, and also a nazir, when he brings his sacrifice, when he stops his nazirus, also bring matzah, not chametz, as crackers. So maybe you can use this as matzah. בקורבן תודה נאמר, in קורבן תודה it says, והקריב על זבח התודה, and it says, with the sacrifice you have to bring חלות מוצות בלולות בשמן. You have to bring חלות of matzah mixed with oil. ורקיקי מצות משוחים בשמן. And also, like, like crumbled matzah that you do with eggs. That's what it looks like. וסולת מורכבת חלות בלולות בשמן, and also סולת, מורבכת חלות, again, you put oil on top of it, it's all kind of how to make this גם. כלומר, שהיו מביאים לתודה 3 מיני מצות. They used to bring for ingredient, for thank you offering, 3 kinds of matzahs. 10 מכל מין, 10 from each kind. 10 חלות, 10 breads, 10 רקיקים ו10 ריבוכים. 10 חלות, 10 רקיקים, and 10 ריבוכים. So it's the way they mixed up with oil, baked differently. וכן בנזיר כתוב, and also in Nazir it's written, והקריב את קורבנו להשם, and he gave his sacrifice to God, וסל מצות סולת, חלות בולות בשמן, ורקי מצות משוחים בשמן. Again, it's מצות with oil. ובא משנה ללמד באותן חלות, מצות, רקי מצות, שאם אדם עשן לעצמו לצורך תודתו ונזירתו, you're right, Arya, it looks like the person is making it himself, not in בית המקדש. How is the imagine it taking place in בית המקדש? I don't know why. Maybe it was baked in בית המקדש by the person, because there was לשכת נזירים, that's what they did over there. That's what I thought always. But never mind. לצורך תודתו ונזירתו, if a person made it for himself, for the purpose of thank you offering, and or for the purpose of his being stop being a Nazir, that's what he made, and he's got left over. So he says, the leftover I'm going to use for what? Afterwards. I eat matzah tonight. אין יוצאים בהם, he cannot do this obligation with them. Why not? ידי חובת מצה, שנאמר, because ושמרתם את המצות. A lot of people think מצה שמורה means kosher. No. מצה שמורה has nothing to do with kosher.
Previous day for that night,
No, שמרתם, we're going to see what is the שמרתם. שמורה, a lot of people think that he has to make sure that there's no water coming to it, and it's been kept from the time that it is cut, and so that's why they call it matzot shmurot. But that's not why. That's obvious. That's because it's a matzah. Yeah, matzah has to be without liquid inside. And this so what's matzah shmura? Matzah המשתמרת לשם מצה אדם יוצא בידי חובתו בפסח. You have to make it for the purpose of Pesach. It cannot be made for a different purpose. And now you see what came, the thing beforehand. The Kohanim, so you have to make it for the purpose of Pesach. And you can see it, if you have ever been to a mitzvah bakery, every batch, 18 minutes, they say, Leshem mitzvat matzah. That's what it, when you say Leshem mitzvat matzah, that's v'shamartem. It says, we're only doing this for what? For the mitzvah of for the mitzvah of matzah. That's not v'shamartem. That's not why. When you say matzot shmurot, it means this shamartem. That it's for that purpose, not for. You can have matzah. Yeah, but you can everything is for that. Yeah, but you can theoretically do everything kosher, yeah, and you didn't bake it only for Pesach. You baked it also. So the shamartem means only for this. יצאו חלות מתוצות רקקי מצות של תודה ונזיר. Now תודה and Nazir are out of the picture because they weren't made for that purpose. שאינם משתמרות לשם מצה לשם זבח, because they were made for a sacrifice and not for Pesach. עשאן למכור בשוק, a person who sells these matzahs, you have to remember, most people come from Be'er Sheva, from faraway places, they don't have a kitchen, they don't have a time to go. So there's a guy standing right next to Beit HaMikdash, and he sells matzahs. So he says, what about that guy? Can you buy from him and use it for matzah? He's usually selling it to whom? This matzot, he's usually selling it to the Nazir. He usually sells it to the guys who brings Korban Toda. So, are you allowed to buy matzah from him? So it says, As'an limkor b'shuk, if a person makes it to sell it in the market, למי שצריך חלות ורקיקים לקורבן תודה, לקורבן נזירות, he sells it for guys who are coming to bring sacrifices, and they need matzahs for the sacrifices. So he says, in this one יוצאים בהם, this one is called משתמר, this one is, why? ידי חובת מצה בפסח. Through this is good, שבקרון זה, because it says in such a manner, המוכר משמרם מתחילה אף לשם מצה. Because the mocher, when he makes them for all the purposes. He has in mind, I can sell to everybody. Yeah, so he makes it, exactly. He says, I'm going to sell. לפי שהוא חושב, because he said, שמא לא יזדמנו לו קונים הצריכים מצוות לתודה או לנזירות. He says, if I'm going to have some leftover, what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to eat matzah. ישתמש בהם לאכילת מצה של מצווה. I'm going to use it. But he has to have it in mind. By the way, okay, let's continue a little bit. מה שנקטה משנתנו חלות תודה ורקיקי נזיר, the fact that our Mishnah says חלות תודה, the thank you offering and the crackers for the nazir, לאו דווקא הוא. It's not specific to that. אלא הכוונה היא לחלות ולרקיקים של תודה. It means Matzah for thank you offering, וכן של נזיר, כמו שבארנו אומנם במשנה. Like we said them in the Mishnah. והוא הדין לרווחים של תודה. It says because חלות and רווחים are a different way to some of them are baked, some of them are oiled from the top, yeah. So it says it's not specifically anything that is matzah, yeah. אלא שהתנא קיצר בשונו ולומר באלה יהיה הדין באחרות. Just like in this, it's in any other thing.